A beloved dad, husband, son, and neighbor, Marty Duram was found shot to death at his Michigan home in 2015. His wife was present at the scene, but after 8 months, no arrest had been made. The only witness willing to speak was Marty's 19-year-old African gray parrot, Bud. What was Bud saying? Would the authorities listen? Does it even matter when the only witness to a crime is an animal? This week's episode is The Murder of Marty Duram and the Story of Bud the Hero Parrot, Part 2.
A bump in the night, your heart fills with dread. Probably a murderer who wants you dead. It could be a ghost, a demon, or worse. Perhaps you're the victim of a witch's curse. It's hopeless, you're doomed. You'd call a priest if you could. You'd rather just listen to Sinisterhood.
Well, we had a great response from episode 1 of this two-part series. This is our second part on Marty and Bud. And we've learned so much about not just African gray parrots, but parrots in general, animals in general.
They're a smart, smart bird.
Oh, they definitely are. And I actually thought of this case when we were watching Fantastic Fungi together in Denver this past week, because I noticed that they said mycelium communicates with one another. And one of the scientists they interviewed said, just because we can't communicate with mycelium doesn't mean they're not evolved enough to communicate with us. Maybe we're not evolved enough to communicate with them. And it made me think,
idiots.
Yeah, it made me think of not just Bud the parrot, Lucy, the goose right now is like having a vestibular episode. I'm like, what do you need? If only we could communicate. If only we could have some, I don't know. You just said that we're the ones creating the robots, and maybe
was offline. I didn't say that, and everyone's like, "What?"
Well, we were just talking about AI and robots and the evolving nature of technology. I think we're on this precipice of new technology, and I hope part of that is communication with animals and mushrooms.
Communicating with babies and toddlers is very similar too. You don't know what they want, and
right.
They don't quite have the language yet that, we understand. So it's a lot of, there's a lot of things I think in our day-to-day lives that get broken down because of communication, even when we can understand each other.
Right. When we're the same species, we still don't understand each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then when you get a parrot who has seen some shit.
Right. And not just this parrot. In our research, we found several parrots have seen multiple different types of crimes and taken
These parrots need their own
protection
support group.
Right. Some type of protection
together where they can all have a chill rest of their lives. They live for a really long time. If you've seen all that, I don't know how it affects them. Maybe that's something else we should also find out, is how witnessing trauma can affect an animal. If a human were to witness that, we know that that's not good.
Right. And they don't have, we could at least talk about it with someone. If parrots, unless you have a second parrot, it appears from photos that Bud's current owner, the Bud's got a buddy. So I think maybe they can squawk back and forth to each other. Another
buddy just 1,000-yard stare after hearing what Bud's seen.
You get an earful from your cage mate, I suppose. But
yeah,
it's one of those where you're like, at least Bud was there, because I think, as you'll see, listener, as you'll hear as this case unfolds, Bud was the linchpin in this case, and I think turned everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we get started, thank you so much to everyone that came out to our tour this past week. We had so much fun in Denver and Salt Lake.
What a blast.
Both super fun shows, great crowds, fun Q&As. We had fun just hanging out in the city too.
Right. We got great recommendations. We got to hang out in Denver for a day before, and then we stayed in Salt Lake the day after, for a couple days after, around Sundance. We also went to Pleasant Grove, Utah, went to Evermore.
That was fun.
That was a good time. We have video footage of that. We'll make some behind the scenes. Maybe we'll film some in our upcoming shows in Austin and Houston, make a little behind the scenes video.
Yes, Austin. Just tomorrow from when you're listening to this, Thursday, April 27th, and Houston the next week, May 3rd. You can go to sinisterhood.com live shows for information on times, venues, and tickets.
And if you're not in Austin or Houston, we may be coming to a place near you. So still check it out. But our little Texas two-step is happening in just a few days. So we'll report back on how South Texas is doing. It's not really South Texas, Central, but south to us. We're in Dallas.
Houston's south to us.
That's
so,
true.
yeah.
It's all south to us.
I mean, I guess Austin is too. It's all south, but...
We're the Yankees of the state.
Oh, Lord. Well, let's get into part 2. I'm Christy.
I'm Heather.
And let's get into it. 46-year-old Marty Duram had been shot to death in his own home, and his family wanted answers. His second wife, Glenna, had been found on the scene with Marty, suffering a superficial gunshot wound to the head and claiming no memory of the night. Letters had been found at the scene, written and signed by Glenna, apologizing to her kids and ex-husband for mistakes she had made. Adding insult to injury, as Marty's family grieved his loss, they discovered that Marty and Glenna's bank accounts had been drained by Glenna's gambling habit, and the couple's house was on the auction block after falling into foreclosure. One possible witness to the shooting was Bud, Marty's 19-year-old African gray parrot who had been in the house at the time of the murder. Considered one of the most accomplished mimics of the animal kingdom, those close to Marty suggested to investigators that they meet with Bud in hopes that he had witnessed vital information and could repeat it to law enforcement. However, police were hesitant to try and use the parrot as evidence.
Which you can understand
Sure.
on first gloss if you're the officer interrogating, or not even interrogating, just questioning a family member, and they're like, you got to talk to the bird. What do you go to your boss and be like, yeah, sir, I'm going to need to make a stop to talk to a bird? Now, understanding what we know about Bud, and it's a great idea. They should have done it early on, but it seems like they were just reticent, I guess, because of appearances, but got to do what it takes to solve the case.
Or the time period. I think maybe now they would get an behavioral animal psychologist or somebody in to work and see what could be done, but yeah, no one was really taking it seriously back then. Parrot or no parrot, Marty's family believed Glenna was responsible for murdering Marty, especially once Bud began repeating a chilling conversation. After Marty was killed, Bud went to live with a familiar face, Marty's ex-wife, Christina. In the 2 weeks following the murder, Christina noticed something strange. Bud was reenacting an argument in 2 distinct voices. She filmed the parrot as he mimicked what he had overheard.
No! No fucking shit!
It's chilling.
It definitely sounds like the last moments of what went down between Marty and Glenna. I mean, parrots, I don't believe, make up conversations. They mimic. They repeat what they've heard. So he would have had to have heard this from somewhere.
Yeah, and if you tried to say, oh, well, maybe somebody in the family trained him, the family said that voice was clearly Marty's voice was one of them and Glenna's was the other. So absent having them there to try to train it to say that, I don't know that you could, because they don't just mimic words, they mimic tone and sound. I mean, sometimes these parrots can sound like a dog.
Yeah, they mimic the cadence of someone's voice. They can mimic other animals. So it would be hard and maybe impossible to train Bud to repeat something that, they had falsified to try and frame her.
No, yeah, it just seemed like Christina said she was at the house and certain sounds would cause Bud, like loud bang sounds or gunshots on TV would cause him to start this. It's almost like a script in his head.
Yeah, yeah. And then he's a bird. You just have to sit there and listen to it.
Yeah.
And every time you hear it, Christina believes, as do many, that she is hearing the last moments of her ex-husband's and the father of her children's lives. And that's haunting, sad, scary. I mean, to have like that constant reminder in the house, and also never really knowing like when Bud might just start saying it.
Yeah.
I'd be on eggshells constantly.
That too, and knowing that whoever did it was not arrested. At this point, when Bud starts making these sounds, there was 0 arrests in the case.
Yeah.
So
Terrified of what it could mean, Christina kept this information to herself, but held on to the footage she recorded. There was one family member, though, that disagreed with Glenna's guilt. Fran Fallon, the psychic married to Marty's cousin, who had told police details of the crime that apparently came to her in a vision. She now told police she thought Glenna was innocent. In July of 2015, Fran even testified on Glenna's behalf at a probate hearing. According to the Detroit News, this angered Marty's family, and on Facebook, his brother Dan wrote,
"You should keep a loaded gun at your side because who knows what can happen. Look what happened to Marty."
I don't think that that's the best response. You don't write it, and especially don't write it all over social media.
Yeah, a lot of we're about to see. There's some other posts in this case on social media that I maybe would not have made. The only thing I can think of, although in context, I think you can tell the purpose of the comment in context. Look what happened to Marty. I guess, does it mean that maybe we don't know who did this and who knows who's out there killing people? Seems more directed, though.
That's not how I read it. Yeah. I read it as more of a threat.
More directed. More of a vague, like, look what can happen.
Yeah. 4 months later, in October of 2015, Fran received an arrow on her front porch with a misspelled threat reading, "You're next." That same month, Glenna was interviewed by police with her mother present. When asked why she wrote what appeared to be 3 suicide notes, Glenna claimed she had no memory of writing the notes, especially the one to her ex-husband, to whom she said she would have had never written more than,
"Kiss my ass."
Well,
on record,
we have a written paper that shows otherwise. So whether you remember it or not, it happened.
Yeah, it's interesting to try and reframe that relationship when, like, we have in black and white that you say, "I'm sorry, take care of the kids, I love you," to just sort of try to change it. But maybe it's just either delusion or thinking, well, if I lie hard enough at these cops, it's been this many months. It's by October. I mean, it's been several months. You're like, I'll just tell them I don't know and I don't remember and I didn't do it, and they'll just give up.
I mean, if you continue to just say, I don't know, I don't remember, I don't know. I mean, what can anybody do?
Yeah, there's it seems like the cops were kind of at a standstill.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not giving up the information, not yet can they go inside your brain and get it.
Right, until
one day.
I just watched the ChatGPT thing last night. It was a TED Talk with the ChatGPT founder, and he said that they trained it to push back on humans. And I think that's the key of where we're all going wrong in this AI journey.
Pushback is in like assert autonomy?
Yeah, he showed it. He showed 2 different things before they implemented the pushback algorithm, that initially you would go like, oh, 5 + 5 is 12, right? That's what that is. And that the ChatGPT was trained to accept the answer of the human and would say, yes, you're right. 5 + 5 is 12. But now if you were like, I'm telling you 5 + 5 is 12, it would say, I'm so sorry. You're actually incorrect. It's actually 10. But before it wasn't arguing, and now they said that before it wouldn't push back against humans, wouldn't argue, and now it does. Anyway, I'm worried about AI. I'm sorry, y'all.
Well, I think in that case, the pushback is warranted because
it's necessary.
It's false information and it's correcting. It's just like the internet would. If you Googled what is 5 + 5, it's not going to say, well, do you think it's 12? Because that might be it. It's going to tell you a definitive answer.
My only concern is right now it's saying that, I'm so sorry, Heather, 5 + 5 is actually 10. What if when I say 5 + 5 is 10, it says, I'm so sorry, it's actually 12. The government says it's 12 now. 1984 reference there. Where like they start push, like, I don't know. Anyway, sorry to get aside on the AI thing. I was up late don't watch TED Talks after midnight. That's a bad idea.
Another thing to point out in this is the misspelled threat, because in the first episode, we talked about how in the alleged suicide notes, your was misspelled. Instead of YOU''RE, it was spelled YOUR. And in this case, with the "you're next," that was the same misspelling.
And we have a picture that Fran posted on Facebook of the arrow with the writing. So we will include the arrow with the writing up next to a screenshot of Glenna's writing that she put in the letters. And you can be the judge and decide for yourself. Sinisterhood will be right back. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We've been traveling a lot. And when traveling, I feel like you learn something new about yourself every day that I thought I had to be an aisle seat. But I realized when traveling with you and Tommy, and it's just the three of us, I feel fine being in the window seat. I think because we love each other and I feel safe and I feel okay and not crammed in over there.
You know that you can ask us to get up if you got to go to the bathroom. There's less anxiety.
Exactly. And I know I can share with Tommy. And also, like, if shit went down with the plane, you guys would try to help save me. That's where my brain goes to. But as I learn these things about myself, I learn I don't know everything about me, even though I am me. I need somebody to help kind of pull that out of me. And that's where therapy comes in.
Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing.
That's why I love therapy. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding. Because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk through things. I didn't know I was freaking out, feeling all cagey in a window seat, but having a therapist is a great way to talk through your issues. BetterHelp connects you with licensed therapists who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from where you are. And that's why I use BetterHelp, because I can send messages, I can do video chats, I can get kind of homework to do to take care of myself on my own time through my therapist.
So many times we think what we like and what we want and what's best for us. But then once you start to talk with a kind of a sounding board and get advice and information, you realize, like you said, we don't always know what we need until we kind of talk through it with someone. Therapy is helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma.
If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge.
Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/sinister today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/sinister. When confronted with the cell phone evidence showing multiple Google searches for the type of Ruger used in Marty's murder, Glenna denied that as well. She said she'd only ever used her phone to play online games, and once again denied any involvement with her husband's killing, telling police,
I did not kill him. I wouldn't kill him because he was all I had.
A year after Marty's murder, police still hadn't made any arrest. His ex-wife, mother of his 3 children, and now caretaker of his beloved bird Bud, Christina, had shared the footage of Bud with Marty's family. When Marty's parents were interviewed for a local story on the stagnation of the case, his family shared the footage with the news station, which then interviewed Christina. Marty's ex-wife told reporters at Michigan's WOOD TV News that she wanted Glenna caught, saying,
She's just evil and mean and dirty inside and out. It's kind of crazy and a lot sad.
You know, sometimes people get divorced and they still care for each other and they still maintain like an amicable relationship, especially if you share kids, you know, and Christina wasn't vindictive. She wasn't upset that, you know, I mean, she was grieving Marty's loss too, and even agreed to take back in Bud because she had lived with him for so many years. So I think it speaks volumes when an ex-wife says of the current wife, like, this is bad. You know what I mean? She's not like, well, I'm not going to have anything to do with this. He's not my problem anymore. Like, he's still a part of her life. They share kids, and she wants to see justice brought just as much as anybody else.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's what his whole family just wanted, something moved. And they were seeing some police reports, and early police reports listed Glenna as a suspect. But months on, there was still no movement, no arrest. And I think, and what Christina said was, I had this footage, you know, I showed it to his sister and was like, whatever we want to do with it. The cops seemed not interested in anything to have to do with Bud. And so finally, when his parents were interviewed, I think they were just being interviewed and kind of mentioned, you know, and we have that footage of the Parrot, and the reporter, of course, spotting a news story when they hear one, said, I'm sorry, what footage? Could you show that to me? Okay, that's the story here. It's a big story, certainly, that, you know, we have a local murder with a pretty clear suspect and no movement, seemingly no movement. But when you figure out, like, there's a recording, granted, it's an organic, living, breathing recording of what happened, I think that's vital to go, okay, well, then why haven't the police looked at this?
It's compelling. It's unique. You know, I mean, it's definitely a headline grabber. it is wild to me that Bud or no Bud, a year later, they still hadn't made an arrest when really, how many suspects are we looking at right now? You know what I mean? It's seems pretty clear cut who would have been the only person to have like the means to do this. And even if not her, there wasn't any movement to try and like find out if somebody else in the area might have known something from, they sold drugs and stuff like that, like looked around there. As his family, I would be just beside myself that for a year, nothing has been done to bring my dad's murder to justice.
But I think you're absolutely right, because his family was like, we went in the house after the police cleared the scene and noticed like the money that was still there that his kids, took. There was weapons. There were like, 50 different weapons. The prescription pill bottles were all over the house, still with pills in a lot of them. So if you'd say there was no fingerprints of any third party, so you think, okay, if this was a third party, we said, oh my gosh, the door got kicked in, there were fingerprints everywhere or whatever. But like you said, none of that was really.
There was a lot of stuff stolen. Guns were missing.
No.
The only thing missing was accounted for, and it was the cash taken by his kids.
Yeah, and it was accounted for. So
yeah, it doesn't seem like any type of robbery was the motive.
No, not at all. Yeah, especially just no indication of anybody coming in from the outside and or taking anything. So yeah, you can imagine as his family, you're like, well, what do we do now? Well, let's talk to the news. Like that's nothing else is helping.
Christina continued not to mince words, saying to reporters,
I think it's a piece of this puzzle. I think it's possible last words. I truly believe with all my heart, most of that comes from that night.
When Bud first began making the sounds, she said chills ran down her spine, saying,
It terrified me. I hear screaming, yelling, and fear.
Christina was sure that the two voices belonged to Marty and Glenna, not Marty and an unknown shooter, telling reporters.
To listen to the whole 2-minute rant and to know Marty and to know Glenna and to know the things that they would say to each other, it's haunting. My house turns cold. I get chills when I hear it.
Christina told reporters she was not the first in Marty's life to suggest asking Bud what happened the night of the murder. She told WOOD.
I looked through the police report. About 4 neighbors said, you need to talk to that bird. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's how intelligent Bud is and how much people believe that he witnessed this.
So now at least 5 people have said, go talk to this parrot. And still the cops are like, no, that's too weird.
It's what it seems like. Either that or the cop said, hey, we're going to go talk to this parrot. And the prosecutor goes, well, I don't care if you talk to a parrot. I'm not going to use it. What's the point?
Which is also valid. I mean, there's no really laws at this point that say what to do one way or the other. I mean, how could they be sworn in? We'll get into that. But I think cases like this are what can change things like that going forward because yes, it's not a person that could get sworn in on the stand, but he definitely is an intelligent creature that witnessed what happened and has vital evidence.
What can we do with it? And at least say, okay, I'll listen to it and then push past that, not just, nah.
No, take your bird and go home. Marty's mom, Lillian, told WOOD TV.
That bird picks up everything and anything, and it's got the filthiest mouth around.
Marty's dad, Charles, agreed, adding,
I personally think he was there, and he remembers it, and he was saying it.
The news story went viral, especially given the lack of an arrest in the case and Bud's penchant for profanity. News agencies around the world picked up the story about the hero parrot who witnessed his owner's murder.
And that's pretty much all the headlines were just, this has happened, a murder has happened, there has been no arrest, the family thinks a bird heard it. And that was the bulk of the headlines about this before, of course, the media kind of gives up and thinks about something else.
Absolutely. Shortly after the news went viral, Newaygo County Prosecutor Robert Springstead told the Associated Press on June 6, 2016, that Bud was not likely on his witness list, saying,
I'm not aware of any legal precedent for that. Certainly, as we work our way through the case, that may be something to look at, but I highly doubt there's any precedent for that.
The prosecutor also struggled with the logistics. Instead of swearing an oath with the right hand, Springstead asked the AP,
I mean, to a parrot, were you raising a wing, a foot?
When asked whether he saw the footage of Bud, Springstead said,
I tried on my smartphone and online. I couldn't get the audio feed to work.
He added,
As soon as I receive the investigation, I'll make a charging decision. I expect that to happen in the next few weeks. It's flabbergasted me.
well, first of all, it's clearly a wing. Why would you raise a foot?
Why are you even
But-
asking?
A foot is a foot, a wing's their hand.
You said, and it would be a talon if it's a bird. So why wouldn't you say, are you raising a wing? A talon would indicate you weren't sure that a talon is a foot, but no one ever raises their foot.
No, you raise your hand, which is their wing. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So, well, we
Obviously.
answered that question right
But-
off the bat. Also, maybe get on your desktop and just see what's up with, just try and check all the evidence from your phone.
You don't have anyone in the office. You don't have a teenage child that you could call and be like, hey, I needed you to watch a video for me. Can you make this video work on my phone? Somebody in the office. But I think, to me, I'm glad we included this quote from him because I think it shows the kind of like, he had to be asked by the Associated Press after the story was global headlines. I mean, it's in like the BBC News.
Mm-hmm.
And to be like, I hadn't heard it. I don't know.
Because they didn't take it seriously. And now
Obviously
they kind
not.
of have to. Their hands
Mhm.
forced because the whole world's looking at them now.
Mm-hmm.
Springstead's timeline was accurate. After the media interest, police finally responded. On June 23rd, 2016, 3 weeks after the news story ran, Glenna Duram was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder. Prosecutors denied the news coverage of Bud had anything to do with accelerating the arrest.
It was just a coincidence.
Yeah, a very strange coincidence that after a year, now they finally decide to arrest her.
Within 3 weeks.
Glenna was evaluated and found to be competent to stand trial. She was tried before a jury in the Newaygo County Circuit Court in July of 2017. The prosecution's case was based on Glenna's financial infidelity, arguing that she had killed Marty, then shot herself in a failed murder-suicide attempt. Throughout the prosecution's case in chief, the jury heard from family members, as well as first responders on the scene that day, and medical personnel who treated Glenna at the hospital. According to testimony from the EMT who rode with Glenna and law enforcement officers to the hospital, Glenna was agitated and asked aloud during the ambulance ride.
Why are you doing this, Marty?
This was also mentioned in a police report, with the same officer noting that Glenna had to be strapped to a gurney.
Due to the fact that she was very combative.
When she was asked who shot her or what happened, Glenna refused to respond.
Mm-mm.
I'm just going to say it. I think it's all an act.
It was all an act. I think so. I agree with that. It's like her family wanted to say, oh, she was in this like horrible coma and was unconscious. But you can read in the police reports that like they spoke to her. She would just be purposefully obtuse. Like she would just go, I don't know. Mm-mm.
Well, and you're bleeding from your head. At the time, you think you have gunshot wounds, or they do. So to say, like, I don't remember seems like a logical response.
Yeah, but even like days later when they would come and visit her in the hospital or the next day or a couple days later, officers wrote in the police report, I would ask her things and she would say yes or no. And then he would start asking about Marty and then it would be like, It wouldn't even be like words anymore. And it's like, all right, either you're having some type of PTSD that's, you can't speak about it because you feel so guilty about what you did, what you saw, or you're straight up just pretending to try to get the cops off your back. And I think it was the latter because it also said she was accompanied in the room with her hospital appointed social worker who's kind of, at the time they weren't really sure if she's a victim or not. And so as a police officer, you can't be like, stop bullshitting me here.
Right.
But I think she was faking it.
The defense attempted to rebut the state's case on cross, focusing instead on the extent of Glenna's injuries. Their client had suffered one small entry wound on the back of her head, as well as an injury to her ear. Injuries the defense claimed would have rendered her immobile and incapable of killing her husband. Police reports confirmed the 2 wounds on Glenna, but surgeons could not tell if there were 2 bullets in her brain, as a CAT scan only revealed
multiple fragments that entered from her right side.
According to police reports. Neurosurgeon Dr. Hayden Boyce testified to the extent of Glenna's injuries. According to Near North Now's reporting on the trial, Dr. Boyce explained that the bullet crossed an area of Glenna's brain not vital to life, with no major blood vessels involved.
And that's what the police report says is, there's 2 wounds, and one was an entry wound and one was like a superficial wound on her ear. And yeah, it's Alec Murdaugh situation.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm still not decided if I think her intention was to actually complete suicide or if it was more of a ruse to garner sympathy and look like a victim herself so she doesn't get, arrested for killing her husband. That part I haven't quite figured out yet. But I do think that the wounds were not, as the evidence shows, like bad enough that where she would have not been able to walk around, commit the crime, hide the gun, all that stuff, lay down, and then just wait for somebody to show up.
Yeah, get up from one room and go in the other room. Yeah, you're right.
How else would her blood have been everywhere?
It would not have been. She walked around all over the place. Yeah, she touched stuff in the kitchen, in the living room. Yeah, I think she wrote the letters and then came and did her act in the living room and then walked in the other room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sinisterhood will be right back.
On cross, Glenna's attorney questioned the neurosurgeon about a wound like Glenna's, asking,
"You said someone could walk around?"
Dr. Boyce replied.
"I said it's possible."
Glenna's attorney pressed more, asking,
"But you didn't see Glenna Duram walk around, correct?"
Dr. Boyce replied.
"No, I have no way of knowing what she could do afterwards."
"No, nobody saw her walking around. If they had, we wouldn't be here because we know who killed who."
Well, someone did see her walking around, but his name is Bud,
that's
and no
true.
one fucking asked. No one called him to the stand.
No.
But I mean, this to me, the whole watching what I did, what little clips I could see, or reading transcripts and things. He was when you're a defense attorney with a guilty client, all you can do is try to poke holes in the state's case or make the state's witnesses look as silly, foolish,
not credible,
incredible as possible. Yeah. And say like, "Oh, well, you're saying anybody could just walk around." He's like, "Well, I'm saying it's possible, but you're not saying she did." It's like, to me though, that like we hear this exchange, it can come across a little meh to the jury. Like the jury's like, obviously.
Yeah. I think it's just filler. It's like, why are you wasting our time and your own breath with asking questions that like don't further this case or bolster your argument at all?
It's like rhetorical, and it's not even productively rhetorical.
No, and it's a bit insulting to think that like you think we can't all draw those connect those dots,
right? Like let the jury give them 2 + 2, and then be like, you don't have to be like, is it 5? Is it 6?
And then they come
7?
back and say, actually, the government has said it's 12.
It's 12. My fears are confirmed.
The state interrogated multiple witnesses about the manila envelope containing the 3 letters from Glenna. Marty's daughter Jessica testified that she was the one who found the envelope as she and her brothers searched their father's house after police cleared the scene. Once found, Jessica and the boys turned the envelope of letters over to the police. The state also questioned Jessica about the fate of the money taken by Marty's 3 children from the safe. The one envelope marked Mount and the other marked Wave Runner. Jessica confirmed the children took the funds to help pay for their father's funeral. Marty's son Jason testified and corroborated what his sister has said. He also recalled a visit with his father the week before his murder and did not feel any concern about his dad's well-being, according to Near North Now. When asked on the stand how he would describe his father and Glenna's relationship, Jason said it was
pretty good.
You don't see everything. And also, for any kid to get on the stand and, and they're not kids, they're, young adults or whatever, but it's an intimidating thing. And at times their relationship was, pretty good, and depending on how often you're around and see them, that might be your take on it.
True. And I mean, I think we know just from every story we've covered and personal experience that abuse takes a lot of different forms. And the fact that verbally they would spar and maybe it was a joke, but we don't know behind closed doors who was treating who how. We do have plenty of evidence that Glenna was financially abusive to Marty, who could not work, who had a disability that she was essentially milking his insurance, taking advantage of that. And so just even if you go over there and say, oh, every time I go over there, my dad says everything's great, Glenna says everything's great. Well, if you don't have the whole picture, just because you don't have access to the checkbook and see that the bank account's got $100 in it and she's blown it all at the casino.
Exactly. Marty's parents also testified. Charles Durham was asked about the gun used in his son's murder. He confirmed that it was his gun and that he had given it to Marty for safekeeping. Marty's mother, Lillian, testified that she was aware of the potential foreclosure of the couple's house and had discussed it with Marty and Glenna.
And I hope his parents do not feel any guilt about this, because I know it would be hard if it was your gun, but there were also like 50 guns in the house. So it just may have been that, Glenna grabbed whatever was out and close. And his mom, she did nothing wrong in the fact that, she, I think if a neighbor, or not a neighbor, like an aunt had called the mom called Marty and Glenna and said, hey, we saw your house was listed in the paper. You don't think you're calling to stir anything up. You just think, oh,
You're
there's
concerned.
been a mistake. There's a concern. Hey, is everything okay? Do y'all need money? So I think it's also sad how inadvertently Glenna pulled his parents into it. Yeah.
And at that point too, when he confronts her and says, why is this in the paper? Why is our house getting foreclosed on? She has an opportunity, I'm sure it wasn't the first, to come clean about everything. But instead, she continues to lie and says it was a mistake. It was not. The house was foreclosed on. So she had lots of opportunities over many years to kind of reset the wrong and start new. But addiction's a powerful thing. So, if that's what she was wrestling with, then they both had a lot of issues. And then combined together, it was just a powder keg that was going to go off. But mostly because of Glenna.
Well, for sure. And I think, too, you think it's what Alec Murdaugh thought. It's what Tom Girardi thought. It's anytime people are gambling, stealing, using money that's not theirs, that they get in a big windfall, which I think for her, being told, okay, now you get to make this many thousands of dollars a year to be a wife, a caretaker, that you think, oh, I'll pay it back. Well, more money's coming. It'll be fine. I'll just pay it back. And she'd realized by the time Lillian called them and said, hey, your house is in the paper, you realize it's too late and the jig is up. And you often see people behave like, animals backed into a corner.
Yeah. They make rash decisions and things start to unravel quickly.
Erratic, yeah.
The state's final witness was a law enforcement officer and computer specialist who examined Glenna's phone. He established that it was her phone that had accessed those Ruger handgun sites the night of the murder. Since the phone had been wiped clean of prints, Glenna's attorney challenged the officer on cross, saying,
you don't know if it was Glenna Durham using that phone.
To which the state trooper agreed.
But also, on redirect, I would say, but she also texted her mom 9 seconds before accessing that site. So was a stranger in the house texting Glenna's mom, responding like, I'm sorry, I was supposed to show up and help you move a desk, and I no-showed. And then the stranger within 9 seconds took her phone and started searching the exact handgun that was used.
None of it adds up.
No.
When it came time for the defense to present its case in chief, Glenna's attorney stood up and told the judge,
the defense rests,
without calling any witnesses. According to the Justice for Marty Facebook page, created to organize supporters of the Durham family, Glenna's attorney called Marty a
golden goose
during the trial, suggesting that Glenna would never have killed the man who financially supported her. At the end of closing arguments, the jury was then given instructions and sent to deliberate. They returned a day and a half later.
And you can see when the defense attorney says the defense rests, and based on the line of questioning he had on cross-examination of these witnesses, they didn't have nothing. They didn't have anything because they would have presented it.
It's one of those where you just kind of got to go through the motions because this is how the system is set up and you've been assigned this case. So, but I can't imagine that you really have a lot of hope that your client's going home.
No, and Paris asked me this yesterday. He was like, what do you do? I can't remember what we were watching on TV about a definitely guilty person's lawyer. And I was like, you just make sure. It's like we talked about with Khalil Wheeler Weaver. His job was to make sure that her constitutional rights were protected and that the state met its burden of proof. And it sounds like he did that. And I don't know that I would have repeatedly called a murder victim, especially one when my client has been accused of killing him for financial reasons, a golden goose repeatedly.
Yeah, especially when the reason that the money is coming in is because he was in a near fatal accident and he has disability payments now. So it's a bad look. It's real tacky.
Yeah, not a choice I would have made, but you might think in the moment, well, maybe it'll work with the jury, but on replay and also as far as how it went over with the victim's family, they didn't love that.
No. As the judge prepared to read the verdict, he praised the jury's attention during the trial, as evidenced by their multiple questions throughout. The jury had deliberated for nearly 8 hours before returning their verdict. They found Glenna guilty of premeditated murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marty's family watched from the gallery as his parents clutched one another tearfully at the result. Glenna appeared to mouth an expletive at the direction of the gallery where Marty's family sat as she was led from the courtroom and back into custody. Christina commented on the news channel's video of the verdict being read, writing,
"And as Glenna's usual self, after every court hearing, she yells at our family, the victim's family, like we did this and it's our fault she killed Marty and did not get away with it. So pathetic. Hashtag justice for Marty, finally." Yeah, the footage of her
It's real
outburst.
cringe. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Just, yeah, it's insult to injury. I mean, you've murdered these children's parent, and now to turn around and curse, it's his ex-wife, but it's also their mom, and it's just shut up. You've done enough to this family.
Yeah. I think it's more of the performance that, she wants to keep up even after being told she's guilty by this jury. If you're angry and stuff, it might read as, well, she's angry because she's really guilty and, we got it wrong, or nah.
No.
I think you're just mad because now you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail.
Yeah, and she just seemed while she does seem mad, I'm sure you're right, it seems performative.
Yeah.
100%, I agree. Watching it, and we'll pull a screenshot from the live that the local news, they did a live feed of it, and it just, yeah, and especially given that his parents were in the gallery and they were sobbing and lost their son, and it's
gross. Theatrics. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sinisterhood will be right back.
One juror interviewed on Investigation Discovery said she never looked back after her jury service and truly believes that Glenna got a fair trial. Still, Glenna tried appealing her conviction, arguing against the admissibility of her phone search history. Her appeal was denied, her conviction was upheld, and she was not granted a motion for a new trial. She is serving her sentence in Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Pittsfield Charter Township, Michigan. One witness that had been noticeably absent from the courtroom was Bud. In Marty's case, Bud wasn't allowed to appear before the court, though his out-of-court statement seemed to have made an impact on the case, at least in terms of notoriety. Even though the state did not call Bud to the stand, could he have testified if they had? Not likely. The Michigan Rules of Evidence refer to witnesses as a person and require each witness to declare by oath that they will testify truthfully. The oath must be
in a form calculated to awaken the witness's conscience and impress the witness's mind with the duty to tell the truth.
This means if the witness is of a certain religion, they can request to swear in a religious text that is meaningful to them.
You have to ask Bud what he wants to swear on.
What do you think it would be?
Well, what books do birds like would be my question. Not to Kill a Mockingbird. It's about justice, but right there in the title, they don't love that one.
Yeah, they probably don't love that one. Maybe How to Care for African Greys for Dummies.
That's right. African Gray Parrots for Dummies. The Jungle Book, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. While Bud can repeat the phrases he hears, it would be difficult for him to convey what form of oath would awaken his conscience. It would be equally difficult for him to place one wing in the air and swear in a court-appropriate manner. Testimony of an animal may also raise constitutional issues, as the accused has a right to confront the witnesses testifying against her.
And that's probably the key issue, is that you can't meaningfully cross-examine Bud. All he can do is repeat for you. It's like playing a tape recorder. You can't question the tape recorder. It just is.
I think that Glenna would definitely like to confront the witness testifying against her, because by all accounts, she also did not like Bud. The family said she was not a fan of Bud. So that makes it even sadder that she killed Marty in front of Bud, took his owner away. Any animal, they bond to their owners, and especially animals like this that live for so long. That is a huge relationship that they have. So it's very sad that Bud doesn't know what's going on. He probably does. He's got the intelligence of a 5-year-old, but now he's been, his person's been taken from him and he has to go live somewhere else. And he saw the worst thing ever.
Right. And it's like he also just has to replay it sometimes, just squawking it out. He seems happier now, but yeah, you're right. Christina and the Duram family said that, Marty got it, but in 1996, and he and Christina were together for 4 years after they got Bud. 12 years together total, but for 4 years after they got him. And she said, I don't really want to talk about it, but whenever we split up, Marty ended up with Bud, and I really, really missed him. And you're right, not only, and yeah, you're right. Yeah. People said Glenn had yelled at the bird, hated the bird. It irritated her. She didn't like the sounds. It didn't like her back. Bud didn't like her back. And you're right. I think it's really sad to watch that, but to watch the footage of how distraught he is when he's going through those moments, because I think he is reliving it just like a 5-year-old could.
And that's interesting. And I don't know the answer to this, but what would make an animal that can mimic, like Bud, repeat something? If they're not hearing it right then and repeating it back to you right then, what is going on in their own brain that now triggers this? Is it, like you said, the sound? They hear a loud sound and it's just like a Pavlovian response to start rattling off this conversation they heard? Or is there something there that we don't know because we can't know? He's a bird.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe it's temperature, pressure. I don't know. Something we can't hear.
Feelings, just emotions.
Oh, he's just missing him. Oh,
yeah. That animals have a ton of emotions in bond. We've been watching a lot of elephant shows. Simon is very into elephants, and elephants, they bond and grieve the death of someone in their pack. It's incredible how close they become to other elephants, and same with birds. And I think that it's arrogant of us a lot of times to think well, they're just animals, so whatever. They're not just animals. They are animals. Guess who else is an animal? We are. Yeah. So, like you said at the beginning, just because we don't know how to communicate with them, maybe we're the ones that aren't quite to that level yet. Maybe they're trying to communicate with us and we haven't caught up evolutionary. So, just chew on that.
I like to think all the animals get together and go, they still haven't gotten it. They've got the internet. They
still don't get it.
Chat GPT. They can't figure out what we're saying. Ugh,
no,
idiots.
Not yet. Yeah. Idiots. That's not to say Bud or another parrot will be totally in the dark about the proceedings. In a 2019 study by Harvard, African greys were able to perform some cognitive tasks at levels beyond that of a 5-year-old human, like using logic when making decisions, as well as gambling. Irene Pepperberg, a research associate in Harvard's psychology department, told the Harvard Gazette,
"Birds are separated from us by about 300 million years of evolution, and their brains are organized differently than ours. That's why this was so exciting, because we were able to show that our parrot Griffin was working at the level of a 5-year-old on a task at which even apes would not likely succeed." It was wild. They were doing not 3-card Monty. What do you call it when they had the ball under the cups and they shuffle them around?
Yeah.
They were doing that with the bird, and they figured out on certain ones they would put 2, and then the bird would figure out that on certain rounds there were 2, but then they would trick him, and then they would put none under the one with 2. So he figured out, well, 50-50. Sometimes it has 2 and sometimes it has none. So he would have to learn when he could gamble, like how often he could gamble based on how many treats that he had already gotten. It's fascinating. I was like, first of all, your job's incredible.
Also, maybe Glenna should have stopped being so mean to Bud and utilized him to help in her gambling, because it sounds like he knows that they know what they're doing.
Right? I'm like, it's one of those things where you spend all this time hating this bird and you could have had a meaningful, intelligent, high-level bond with him, because it sounds like you could play games with them.
Yeah. Given African Gray's uncanny ability to repeat things, could they be used for evidence? What about recordings of them or testimony about their behavior? In a March 2022 case in the state of Oregon, the appeals court held it was reasonable for a trial court to use sounds and behavior of an animal to determine whether the animal was in pain for purposes of convicting a defendant on charges of animal abuse. The court drew analogies with cases where a human victim could not testify concerning pain, and concluded reasonable inferences could be drawn as to the meaning of the animal's sounds and behavior.
And this was pretty groundbreaking, just insofar as there are now animal laws in more and more and more states. I think there should be one in every single state, because there's a very tight correlation between animal cruelty and eventual domestic violence and then murder. And that's not at all overstating the issue. But that previous to having these laws, issues like this weren't litigated. You just go like, oh, animals, it's just a thing. It's like this water bottle next to me, or my computer mouse is no different than the mouse in a trap. Well, we know that it is different. And finally, we're seeing courts say, and what the court said in this case was, if you have a baby and you've accused someone of child abuse, or you have a puppy and you've accused someone of puppy abuse, and you say, well, the child has a bruise, and when you push on it, the child cries, you know that the child is in pain, much like if you see that a dog is bruised and you push on it, you know the dog is in pain. So they're saying, why would we ignore a dog's cry when we would pay attention, heed a baby's cry? Because it's essentially the same, what you said earlier, we're all animals, it's the same function.
And we can't communicate with babies and toddlers like that yet. So, I mean, it absolutely makes sense.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's good that the law is finally catching up to what we as a society know of, like, yeah, you can draw a reasonable inference that this dog, and in what I think we will see as we move forward in this is, if you say, my neighbor was accused of animal abuse and then he's in court and my dog survived, but my dog's one of the dogs was one of the victims, and you meet the dog, bring the dog towards him, and if the dog cowers, whines, lays on the ground, could you then say, okay, well, the dog has now testified, but really didn't testify, you just let the jury watch the dog's reaction?
Like anything, you're seeing behavior and cause and effect of something. I think there's a lot of cases and evidence that is presented where it's not a person giving a statement. It is more just reactionary and behavior and things that language isn't necessarily needed.
Yeah, exactly. Or language that doesn't involve words, right? Body language, sounds, tones. Yeah.
Figuring out what to do with an animal witness is nothing new for law enforcement. In Santa Rosa, California, one lawyer wanted to use an African gray parrot to prevent his client from being wrongfully convicted. Charles Ogolnik was serving as a public defender in 1991 when a 36-year-old woman was murdered in her own home. Like Marty Duram, her African gray parrot, Max, was present at the time of the crime. After the murder, Max went to live with the owner of a local pet shop, who reported to law enforcement that the bird would say,
"No, Richard, no, no, no,"
in the voice of his former owner, the murder victim. The defendant charged with her murder was named Gary, not Richard, so the public defender wanted to use Max as a recording of what had happened. When Mr. Ogolnik brought up Max's cries during the testimony of his private investigator, the state objected, and the objection was sustained. Mr. Ogolnik was denied the opportunity to mention Max. His client was convicted of murder for financial gain and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. What do you think about this? I mean, it's compelling.
Right. I dove deeper into this case because I wanted to know who Richard was, if there was anyone named Richard. Kind of the very truncated version of this case was that Gary and the victim co-owned a business together, and there was some sort of perhaps romantic financial struggles. He had a relationship with her, and I believe convinced her to take out a life insurance policy on herself. And so whatever happened with Richard, or if the bird was saying Richard no about something else, but Mr. Ogulnik really wanted to bring it up. And so I think he did it in the only way. It's hard, though, because he did it by questioning the investigator and his own investigator. So this was on the defense direct. And he said, Mr. Private Investigator, why did I tell you to go to the pet shop and speak to the owner and about the parrot? And the private investigator said, well, the parrot had been saying some really interesting things. Objection. And your objection is going to be on, I would say, hearsay grounds, because if you're saying to the jury, hey, we have a recording, whether it's a tape, not a recording, but we have a person, say the shop owner, or even this private investigator going, hey, this bird said to me, no, Richard, no. Are you now trying to offer that statement, no, Richard, no, for the truth of the matter asserted? Insofar as saying it's true that she said, no, Richard, no, and therefore that's, reasonable doubt and Gary didn't do it. And if so, then that is classic hearsay. And I don't know what exception you would try to get the bird's no, Richard, no in under, unless maybe an excited utterance, which is an exception to hearsay of something like they just said it excitedly. So in that case, you have to lay a foundation for a piece of evidence. So I think if you wanted to try to get the bird in, you'd have to bring the shop owner in, and not the bird, maybe a video of the bird. But the problem is laying a foundation for it and saying, yes, this bird, I can confirm that it was in the house at the time. Like, can you even prove that it was home at the time?
Of the murder.
Of the murder, yeah. And then beyond that, maybe you could get an expert to testify and say, birds are reasonably reliable recording devices. Here is my credentials and here's my work with African Grays specifically. So that's an expense that you'd have to pay. Although, if you're on the line for murder, that might be an expense. This sounds like he was a public defender, so they probably did not have the funds to call in a parrot expert. And then if you try to put it in there, it depends on if it's a defense case, if it helps the defense's case or if it helps the state's case. Either way, you could do it. But I wonder too, just if courts of appeals would strike it on constitutional grounds of that's a witness that I can't cross-examine. You all are just taking some bird.
It's hearsay too. I mean, we don't admit hearsay from a person. So if person had been in the house at the time of the murder and they're like, I heard her from the other room say, no, Richard, no. Well, you didn't see it happen? No, I just heard it. Well, again, that's hearsay and we wouldn't admit it. So I think in a case like this, that's what it would fall under, exactly like you said.
Yeah, and I think even if you brought the bird into the room and poked it or whatever, played a sound, whatever you can do to get it to repeat that, the sound that they allege is the last moment, then the problem is again, you're right, that's an out-of-court statement. Is it by the victim? We think that it's by the victim, but it's not an actual recording, so we can assume it. So I think you have a lot of issues that come in on laying a foundation and making sure that that's exactly who it is. And I can see why if you had other compelling evidence, you would not want to try to step into that arena, because there are a lot of, I think, evidentiary issues and constitutional issues. But on the flip side, I think if you had no other evidence and you were convinced that this person, and you had to take a bite at the apple today, double jeopardy, you don't think that you're going to lose, or you think even if I do lose, I've got nothing else and I'm going to get nothing else, you might take the chance.
Might roll the dice. And even if they did say, obviously Max and Bud are repeating these phrases, that's not to say that it happened at the moment that they are saying it happened. At some point, this bird could have overheard, no, Richard, no. At some point, Bud could have overheard, get your ass back here, don't shoot. It seems like that would be the last moments. However, if I were a defense attorney, I would probably argue that that could have happened over the course of any time, that there were guns in the house, that they had kind of a dangerous lifestyle at times with selling drugs. So who knows what kind of characters were walking in and out. So there's a lot of room for error, and I could see why it wouldn't be admitted. I do think, though, and I think it'll be interesting to see, over the next few decades, how it does evolve with using animals in a greater capacity for things like this.
That's a really good point too, because and you're saying if I was on the defense side, and you would want to have that option to be able to object to that, because if it was, oh my gosh, Richard was trying to hang a painting in her house and she was like, oh my gosh, Richard, no, not that side. And for some reason they mistake, you don't want to use it to get people off who should be convicted. And on the one hand, I think, okay, well, just play it for the jury and let the jury decide. But on the other hand, I think you also have the issue of it's more prejudicial than it is probative, because it is something that's it sounds very dramatic. We played the audio for y'all of Bud. It sounds distraught, and that might be something that it sways the jury in a way that it sways them more than some other more corroborated, more solid evidence would.
Yeah. Agreed.
Sinisterhood will be right back.
In the early days of losing Marty, his family created the Justice for Marty Facebook page to galvanize support for their loved one's case. They now use the page to combat misinformation and memorialize Marty and the family he left behind. Regarding the hero pet whose involvement seemed to move the case toward justice, the family wrote,
Bud gave us a gift by being the sole witness to Marty's tragic death and shed light and popularity on Marty's case to get the woman responsible behind bars. And for that, we are forever grateful to Bud. Helping us put the woman that hated him and killed Marty where she belongs is something we will never forget.
As for Bud, he remains with Christina. African Greys have an average lifespan of 40 to 80 years. Only time will tell what other sinister information Bud may know. But for now, his loyal companionship helped bring justice to Marty Duram and his family. So what do we think?
Yeah, I think you're right about animals finding a place in the courtroom that may not be the same as people, just like we had to do with digital evidence. We had to update the rules of procedure, and we had to update. It kills me when everyone's like, the Constitution says this and it's set in stone. That is chaotic thinking, and it makes no sense.
How long ago was that written? I don't
Exactly.
know. I haven't taken a history class in a long time, but it was a really long time ago. What time? What year?
I'm aware of 1787. I'm told it's the Schoolhouse Rock, so it's not that like I took a class. It was Schoolhouse Rock, but I think we have to evolve the laws as we evolve as a society in all areas, especially in criminal procedure, and I think especially in evidentiary procedure. And we're behind, frankly, on the times of what the Non-Human Rights Project, which is they're pushing to recognize cognitively complex animals in courts. And there's an article in The Cut, we'll link it in the show notes, about kind of their push toward more animal recognition. But I think just like we've done with, does the Fourth Amendment apply to a cell phone? Fucking obviously it does. But, it takes a change. How do we analyze cell phone data so that it fits the rules of evidence in court? We write the fucking rules for it, man. Same thing with animals. I think it's going to be like, well, how do we utilize animal? Well, we don't really know. Write the rules, man. I don't know. They could get together and figure it out. All the rules, by the way, including the Constitution, are made up. So we can just make up new ones that fit better to us, that we all come together as a consensus, a central consensus, and say, this works for all of us. So I think we should do that, because I think animals are extremely valuable, especially smart as hell ones like Bud.
It's ignorant to think it was all figured out hundreds of years ago, so we don't need to touch it again. We're all evolving. Technology evolves, everything evolves. So a written document should also evolve to reflect the current times. And the more we learn, the more we gotta update shit.
Yeah.
Like any business, if you want any business to succeed,
Yeah.
you have to grow with the times. And guess what the biggest job is? keeping this fucking planet alive.
That's all of our number one jobs. I don't care. I repair typewriters. I don't care that everyone has a cell phone. I repair typewriters. It's like, it might be fine that that's if you do that as a niche business, and you can be very niche, but also you have to, I think, respond to the times. And, other countries, I think in France, a couple times in France, what I mentioned as far as like the dog coming in and maybe whimpering, they've tried it, but I don't quite think that they're, just like with us, they're struggling. Like their rules of evidence haven't quite met, or they said, well, it's not compelling enough for a jury to see it or whatever. So I think we need to have, what will be beneficial to all of us is have clearly established guidelines for utilizing animals in the courtroom, just like we have clearly established guidelines for utilizing technology in a courtroom. And you say, like, if it's this type of crime, we'll allow the evidence, and you have to have this type of experts. And we have that in, it's not that any doctor any person can come and be an expert in court. Like there's rules under the rules of evidence. There's Supreme Court precedent. You hear Daubert motion. There's certain guidelines that guide us in what can be used in a courtroom, and we just need it for animals too.
Not any yokel can just get on the stand, except for in the Murdoch case when they're like, "This is how I know about the phone because I just sat in my office and flipped it up and upside down for 30 minutes.
I put it in an envelope and threw it, and like, who was in the room with you? No one.
Nobody. Did you
write
it
it down?
Also, no.
Did you write it down? I did not. And I don't remember now, but at the time I was like, oh, there's a couple. They would have had to, not to get too far aside in the Murdoch, but because there are rules of evidence that require for certain things to be submitted as written or filmed of this expert's experiment, that I don't know that he would have passed all those. And so that's why he got up there and was like, yeah, I just threw it around. It's just me. But yeah, I think similarly, we gotta have some kind of standards, and because it's only going to get, and also what happens when we each have, not to bring this back to robots again, but I just saw a video that, of course, it's coming from inside the house. Samsung, my husband works at Samsung. They have these, I saw a video of these, like, it's like Rosie the robot. Like, it's these robots, instead of just being a Roomba that like vacuums, it puts dishes in the dishwasher.
Oh, get me one of those.
Honestly, but it goes around and does this. So what happens when you have this robot that's, frozen in the corner, but in case of like a Hey Siri situation, is always recording you to this cloud, and maybe and then there's a fight or a murder or whatever, and they say, well, Rosie the robot knows. Well, we have that now, and what do? We call Google, Samsung. Usually Amazon Web Services owns the internet. Amazon owns the internet, by the way. And you just have to send them a subpoena and say, hey, my robot, I think it heard this. Will you send me back the transcript or send me the audio from this night? And we've established that as a society, evidentiary wise, we think the server's reliable, the robot's reliable, because we've done these tests on it. And I think based on studies at Harvard and a bunch of other organizations, we'll see that parrots under these certain parameters can be a precise utilization, like it's a precise thing to utilize in the courtroom.
Well, that sounds like a Black Mirror episode. In fact, there has been a couple that are similar in nature to just things getting recorded that you can't argue with it.
Can I put a request in? Because I believe there's
me.
To you,
sure.
You're hearing it live, folks. Maybe like our May.
Let me get our suggestion box out that I just made, and I am waiting for the first one to go in.
I have a suggestion box. Maybe we can do like our May mini-sode on Patreon about audio recorded, like Alexa and Siri hearing crimes. That's been that's floating around. It's a fascinating subject, because I think that's, or like, if you've been asking Chat GPT certain things like, what's an effective way to poison my husband? Or is it gonna, not that I've looked it up.
Or can you make a picture that looks like this and it's something real fucked up and awful, and you're like, why do you want to see that?
Yep, exactly. No, I wonder. So yeah, maybe we'll do that. But that's something that fascinates me, is the intersection of law and technology, and especially catching the law up to where we are technically. And I think we've known about what they say. We're separated from birds by 300 million years. We've had this much time to understand them. We're behind. We're the ones behind.
I think so. I mean, they know how to fly. So
yeah, what the fuck do we know? We have to fly in an airplane.
Fly. Yeah, we got
our little seatbelts on and our little neck pillows like little babies. Meanwhile, Bud's out there soaring.
Yeah, he can soar. He can talk. He can see things from great heights that we can't see. how ignorant and arrogant we all are to think we know more than Bud.
Respect those birds.
Yes, respect the birds, respect each other, respect this planet.
And all the mushrooms.
We're on one about mushrooms right now. If you haven't watched The Fantastic Fungi, and yes, it's pronounced fungi, which you will learn in the Netflix show, please go watch it because it's the future and we're all connected.
It's very fascinating. But I think that actually, I appreciate you sharing that with me because it helped me with this case being like, because on the front end, I'm like, I'm no Dr. Doolittle. And it's like, if only we all were. Dr. Doolittle was the most evolved of us all.
He could talk to animals.
Damn.
We love providing Sinisterhood to you at no cost. So if you like what you hear, consider supporting the show by donating to our Patreon. We're a small operation, creating this show for you by researching, writing, recording, and producing it ourselves. Any amount is sincerely appreciated and helps offset the cost of making and hosting the show.
As a thank you, you'll also get some sweet perks like ad-free episodes, a Sinisterhood sticker, membership to our exclusive Patreon Facebook group for those in the Ruling the Airwaves and Getting Into It tier, a special shout out on the show, a monthly bonus minisode, and patron-exclusive audio content like Am I the Asshole?, Relationship Advice, Judge Christie, Dear Sinister, True Crime Headlines, and more. And patrons in our Getting Into It tier are also able to vote on a bonus content that they would like to see us live stream. And our next one is April 30th at 8 p.m. Central, and the voting is open now. I think that Rural Internet Post has won by a landslide. So
nice.
You can sign up to vote, but I think it's too late.
Well, now you sign up to watch it because there's some gems right there.
I almost woke Paris up last night. I was laughing at the Real Mesquite so much last night. There's been chaos going on there. It always is. I thought at first people are going to ask to see more Rural Internet Posts, and I won't have any. But my hometown delivers, so we got a lot going on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a well of information. You also have the fun perk of access to our Discord server, where you can connect with other fans in real time and discuss the latest in true crime, share personal ghost stories, or just post adorable pictures of your pets. We hop on occasionally, and we host monthly Q&As on Crowdcast, where you can ask us all your burning questions. When is this month's, Heather?
If you're listening to this the day that it comes out, April 26th, and it's early enough in the day, you have until 8 p.m. Central to see us tonight for our April Crowdcast Q&A. If you miss it, that's okay. We put the audio only out the next day, and you can watch the video replay immediately once it's over on our Patreon on Crowdcast. So head to... you can just click on the exact same link you would to register if you were watching it late and hang out with us next month.
There's so much fun. I'm sure we'll talk about the recent tour. We always get some great FMKs.
Oh,
Last time someone said, what's the most helpful thing you've bought for under $100? I love questions like that.
And it gets us to, I'm like, oh, damn, I need to bust that out. That was helpful.
And then it gets a conversation in the chat going. The chat's always a ton of fun. Tommy's always in there popping off.
Always popping off. The chat's what makes it. Thank y'all for being in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
For our patrons not in the U.S., you have the option to pay in pounds or euros, saving you the cost of conversion fee. Annual memberships for all tiers are also now available. Those that select this option will be rewarded with a free month of membership.
For more details on all of this and specific member tiers, visit Sinisterhood.com and click Patreon on the top banner. And make sure you stick around after our sign-offs to hear your shout-out.
So many of you have been tagging us in pictures of you sporting your sweet Sinisterhood merch. Keep those pictures coming. If you want to get some cool Sinisterhood swag like t-shirts, mugs, totes, stickers, and even clothes for your kiddos, visit Sinisterhood.com and click shop on the top banner.
You can support the show fast, easy, and at no cost to you by rating, reviewing, and following on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Speaking of reviews, you can easily leave one by going to Sinisterhood.com/reviews. Yours may even be featured on our social media. Have a friend who you think would like us? You can easily share any episode with them by clicking the 3 dots in the top right corner. You can also share topic-based playlists from Spotify by visiting sinisterhood.com/playlist.
You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Sinisterhood Pod and like us on Facebook at Sinisterhood. We're on TikTok and YouTube at Sinisterhood Podcast. If you head over to our YouTube page, you can see full-length video interviews with all of our Freaky Friday guest stories, as well as just listen to the show on YouTube if you want to do that. You can also head over to cameo.com/Sinisterhood and book your personalized video shout outs. We will say happy birthday, happy anniversary, hey, what's up? We're going to a Sinisterhood show. I love you. You can do it. Any kind of message you want to send, we can send it for you. So book those custom video shout outs at cameo.com/Sinisterhood. Christy, where are you at online?
I am on Instagram at Christy M. Wallace and Twitter and TikTok at Christy or GTFO. Heather?
I'm on Twitter at MCK versus the world, and I'm on TikTok and Instagram at Heather versus the world.
As always, the devil rules the airwaves.
Keep it creepy. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for supporting the show on Patreon. Here are your special Patreon shout-outs. Daniela St. George.
Chantel McWork.
Vic Hughes.
Christina Hollowell.
Emily Abe.
Sierra Howard.
Amanda.
Devin Rich.
Craig Hawley.
Jesse.
Mojo the Hojo.
Kat T.
Seren.
Rachel.
Stacy.
Crystal Powell.
Nikki Howe.
Rachel Castleman.
Olivia Nordman.
Thank you so much for supporting the show. We could not do this without you. We sincerely appreciate all the love and support, and we hope we pronounced your names correctly. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep it creepy.
Sinister.